lawyers of Reddit, what was the best gotcha moment you ever experienced? I was representing mom in a bitter custody fight. Dad wanted full custody and argued mom was an unfit parent. Mom wanted full custody because dad had a history of domestic violence towards her and the kids. Dad's lawyer was doing a good job of painting her in a bad light during his cross-examination, and I was starting to get worried. His lawyer brought a close family friend as a character witness for dad, who said the usual nice things about dad. Then he said something about the moaning chickens. I thought that was odd, so I asked more questions. I was able to get the friend to spill the beans that the dad owned chickens for illegal cockfighting, and he'd take his minor children to these cockfights, and when the children were acting up, he'd punish them by forcing them to feed the chickens, during which they would get pecked and scratched by the chickens. And obviously, the children were terrified of those chickens. I could see the color draining from dad's lawyer's face. Mom got full custody. This one broke my heart. What type of bottom-feeding C-scrum can do that to their own kids? Agreed. I've kept track of this family over the years and all the kids are doing well with mom. My client's house burned down from an explosion in the fuel oil tank used to heat the house. It was clearly the oil maintenance company's fault, but his homeowner's insurance, from a very reputable company, still refused to pay out, citing a ridiculous technicality in his policy. Essentially, the policy covered damage caused by the oil heater, but they claimed that it was the storage tank that exploded and wasn't part of what was covered. So they deny his claim, which was about 1.2 million, and then I get involved. During a deposition with the claims adjuster, I ask how she came to the conclusion that the storage tank was not a part, or at least connected to, the heater. She states that she relied on her expert witness who was an engineer. Little did she know I had already checked this person's background. He had zero engineering experience or education. As most of you might know, you don't get attorney's fees in most cases. However, when an insurance company denies your claim in bad faith, now you do. Her little admission cost the company about $500K in fees, on top of the original claim for $1.2 million. And this is why so many people try to screw insurance companies. Because they're right there, trying to screw you too. I was trying to get a restraining order for a woman in DV court from her son's father. We are presenting testimony and she details a story where he grabbed her arm and slammed it on the tub, breaking her wrist. On cross, I asked the accused if he ever broke my client's wrist on purpose. His response, "Fuck yeah, I did." She was 9 months pregnant, about to smoke crack and wouldn't stop. I tried to grab her arm to get the pipe and protect my unborn son. Fuck me. She left that detail out in her conversations with me, cross-examining a custom home builder who had a lump sum contract, set price as opposed to cost plus, which means cost of the materials plus X% as builder fee, with the homeowner. Claimed he put 20% more labor/materials in building the home than the contracted provided for, and he was suing for these excess costs. Was asking him about an email with my client negotiating the price of the construction, and he volunteers that he knew he couldn't build it for that price. My head snaps up, supervising partner's head snaps up, and opposing counsel goes pale. Dialogue was something like, "Me, you quoted X price?" Builder, "Yes me, you knew you couldn't build it for that price?" Builder, "Yes me, you knew the homeowner was relying on that quote?" Builder, "Yes me, you knew homeowner wouldn't have signed contract without that representation?" Builder, "Yes me, and you told homeowner's lender you could do it for X?" Builder, "Yes me, and bank relied on that price and wouldn't have given loan if knew it was wrong?" Builder, "Yes, this is textbook fraudulent inducement and he had no idea." Builder got poured out in the arbitration award and slapped builder with sizable punitive damages on top of it. 5 minutes of testimony sunk his case because he volunteered information without being prompted. Edit, thanks for the correction /u/new Luna. Plaintiff had an X-ray of an allegedly broken arm. It seemed off to me and the dates didn't make sense. I was in-house at an academic medical center. I looked at the case more closely and discovered the plaintiff was a X-ray tech at another hospital. After that, it was all over. I had client whose 60k car was ruined by a shop that put in the wrong oil. We couldn't prove it at first, the engine blew up, oil leaked out and evidence was lost. I subpoenaed their bank records, figured out they bought their oil from Costco. Called Costco and got their prices for the last 2 years. I then worked out the amounts they were spending, did some backhand math, and showed based on the values it was impossible they had ever bought the right oil. They settled in full immediately. You got to admit, it is the most satisfying thing when the opposition caves in immediately when you prove what they are saying is impossible. The first case I ever did, opposing counsel misplaced the copy of my client's driver's license. Rather than admitting his mistake and asking me to resend it, he filed a motion to compel, claiming we never sent it. Well, I was able to provide proof that we'd sent it to him like 8 months ago, so the judge was rather displeased with his antics. The judge was rather displeased with his antics, not a lawyer, but this tends to be my impression with judges who catch people doing shady things. I remember once, during undergrad, being an intern with the probation office and the case ahead of our revocation hearing had a guy pleading guilty. During his rambling and disjointed allocution, the judge frowned, "So why are you pleading guilty exactly?" The guy replied, "My lawyer told me to." The judge was most displeased when he questioned the guy further and found out the guy had no concept of what he was doing or what the potential sentencing could be. Sometimes, it's just incompetence. I was observing a federal case 2 weeks ago. In the opening statement, the lawyer had a PowerPoint presentation that looked like something a high school student made. It was filled with clip arts, powerful, but irrelevant, pictures that evoke feeling like handcuffs, jails. The judge stopped him, sent the jury away, and asked the lawyer, "You realized you cannot present arguments in an opening statement, right? Do you have any other similar visual in your presentation?" The lawyer said no and the jury was called out again. Presentation continued but there were more pictures so the judge had to stop him again. This time the judge said, "You clearly had no understanding what is allowed in an opening statement so I'm just going to disallow the presentation altogether." There was a few more times the judge had to call the lawyer out in that case but ultimately his side win. It was a very odd case with so much mistake by that lawyer. Someone told me this. The lawyer was describing the theft. The footprints make it seem as though he didn't go to the basement and the defendant said, "Actually we did." I think it was a Judge Judy clip where the woman is listing a number of items stolen from her by an ex-boyfriend. Jewelry, credit cards, electronics, and a certain amount of money. There wasn't $X cash in there immediately followed by "That's how judges do when people are that dumb done." https://youtube.b/suxtfsilo for anyone interested. Not a lawyer, but when I was in the military I was accused of something I didn't do. And I had to go to court over it. And during court the prosecutor started to detail this investigation and how they had staked my apartment out for months. They entered into evidence a picture of my apartment. And when they put it up I looked shocked at my lawyer BC. It wasn't a picture of my place. It was my ex-wife's apartment. A place I had never lived, never even spent a single night there. I lived in a house, she lived in an apartment. And when my lawyer was asked if she objected to the picture being entered into evidence she replied, "I don't mind them entering it into evidence as long as they change the listing of it." And when one of the members of the panel, no judge, 3-member board, asked what was wrong with the listing, she looked at him and said that's not his apartment. On top of this the witness they used against me described going to my house on the night in question and she named the subdivision where she had visited me, except that wasn't where I lived either, also wasn't where the picture they had was either. Case was dismissed and I was told they requested the witness to return to answer questions about perjury. Lamau, when you investigate the entirely wrong house, someone getting fired. Dude, you have no idea. The funny thing was, when they brought me in to question me they had this huge folder full of their evidence and I was just like, WTF is going on in there? And because I wasn't cooperating by confessing to something I hadn't done they wouldn't show me what was in it. But they had to turn it over to us before court. And it was legitimately like 5 or 6 months full of entries where they had someone scoping out my ex-wife's house. And each entry said something along the lines of when they got there, how long they were there, and no contact made with subject. So they really were at the wrong house every day for 5 or 6 months and never realized it. I have no idea why they never just tailed me home from work or something. My wife had insurance through me for my daughter, so when they updated her address in the hospital computer, somehow they also changed mine as well. But this was back when phone books were still pretty useful, and my address was properly listed in the damn phone book. They just never looked. They just sat at the wrong house for 6 months and still went forward with this case that they had no evidence on. Edit. So all of this investigation and drama led to a court case where the entirety of the evidence against me was basically the word of 2 witnesses. One who never testified, and the other who said she came to my house. She was never there, in a subdivision where I never lived. I mean, that was one thing I really hated about the military, that they can just do stuff like this to you. BC, the trial never would have happened in the civilian world. I was deposing a guy in a large breach of contract/fraud action. I asked him if he'd ever been convicted of a crime. He said no. Later in the dep I asked him the question again and there was no objection and he answered no. I then whipped out his indictment for felony fraud and his conviction for misdemeanor conspiracy, and he denied it was him until I started asking about his co-conspirator, his son, and then he gave me the "oh yeah, I remember something about that." I can just picture opposing counsel's faces. How did they not prep for that? Was he self-repped? He could have lied to his counsel, and they were foolish enough to believe him. I was suing a landlord who failed to make serious repairs in order to force the tenant out. The hard part is proving bad intent instead of mere idiocy, so you get higher damages. Code enforcement was involved, so I request those records. The landlord left a voicemail to the enforcement department saying to hold off on the fines. They will make the repairs as soon as the tenant is forced out. That was an easy case. Some crap like this happened to my dad. Landlord refused to make repairs, washer was busted, garbage disposal was leaking and forced floorboards to warp. My dad moved and wanted his deposit. They wouldn't give it to him. He took them to court. He took pictures before he left and kept all texts from them. They walked themselves into a corner with everything they said. My dad was prepared for every claim. Eventually the judge told my dad he could fight it until the end and get his whole deposit, or the landlord could give most of it now and it would be over. He took the deal because he didn't have the time for court, and the look of anger and defeat on the landlord's face was too satisfying. It's 3 years later and the repairs still haven't been made in the apartment. Edit. Spelling. Also, he heard about the lack of repairs from his old neighbor who still lives there. I never understand these kinds of situations. The cost of repairs can't amount to more than a few $100s at first. The warped boards might push that up over $1K, but I'd be surprised if those repairs exceeded $2K. They easily spent more than that in court. Told this story a few years back, but everything old is new again. My brother is a divorce attorney. His most memorable case, he was representing a guy in a divorce custody battle who was accused of horrific child abuse. Very graphic, very detailed depositions from the young kids against daddy. Things look grim. Then my brother notices the deposition transcript, done by social workers under oath, contains a question at the end from one of the kids: "Did I hit my marks?" My brother had previously tried to make it as an actor in Hollywood right out of high school, failing miserably, and decided to go into law, an altogether different form of acting. He wonders how little kids know about acting jargon. Subpoenas the wife's personal checking account during discovery. Sure enough, acting lessons. Deposes an extremely sketchy acting coach, and panicked coach quickly coughs up DVDs of practice interrogations with the kids, hours of coaching the kids on exactly what imaginary things to say about daddy. He says it was his one and only Perry Mason moment in 20 plus years of practice, and dad got sole custody of the kids. Holy shit, fake accusations of serious crimes make my blood boil. The wife could have put her ex in prison for years over something he didn't do. Edit, blood, not mood. Imagine being wrongfully imprisoned for the crime of molesting your own children. I can't even imagine the amount of rage. When I was a prosecutor, I had a guy who was representing himself. He was charged with car theft and evading. He was actually able to escape the cops for quite a distance and was captured later. His defense was that he wasn't the person. I got his calls from jail and he talked so much to his girlfriend about how he had committed the crimes. The look on his face when I told him that I was providing him copies of his jail calls was great. Edit, I remember an even funnier thing. I had another guy who was representing himself. It was a residential burglary and one of the elderly neighbors saw the defendant running from the house. At trial, the defendant was cross-examining the witness and he asked, "Now when you saw this person running away?" And the witness said, "You. I saw you running away." Jail calls. The bane of the criminal defense attorney. I've had more than one case that was pretty good, until I discovered my guy confessed to everything and more in the jail. I can't talk about the case. My attorney told me not to. Everything is being recorded. 20 minutes later, so then after I pried the door open with the crowbar, plaintiff alleged he was so injured in an auto accident that he couldn't work, do any regular activities, or pick up his young kids. He then posted on his public FB profile him doing the ice bucket challenge. If you're not familiar, he basically lifted a huge cooler filled with ice water over his head. His attorney had no idea he had posted it. Once heard about a man who got a doctor to do him a report for his compo claim, can't bend, can't lit, can't run, etc. Problem was, he had a paternity suit ongoing at the same time. Got the same doctor to write a report for that case, no restrictions on mobility, can pick up the kid, play with him, etc. As you can guess, he, and the doctor, got caught. Represented a DUI client who swore up and down to me he hadn't been drinking or doing any drugs. Newbie officer who had his field training officer with him in the car. Rookie pulls client over for a tag violation, walks back to the car with body camera still on. Training officer says get him out for a DUI and the rookie says but he's not intoxicated, to which the reply was do it anyway. Body cam clicks off, turns on 7 minutes later and they're doing field sobriety exercises on my client. Client sat in custody for 3 weeks until I finally got the tape from the prosecutor and presented it to the judge. The oh shit looks from the prosecutor and FTO when the judge saw the tape. I'll treasure that one. Judge wrote the police chief a letter saying the FTO was dead to him and he'd deny every search warrant he tried to bring thereafter for being a liar. Client is hopefully still on track with his civil attorney in a lawsuit. I love body cams so very much. My only full trial. Contractor ripping off my client who was no saint. I went through entire contract where each sub was listed and he agreed to each line as being part of contract. He agreed that amount was to be paid to the subs. He agreed to the total. What he failed to do was list any profit. My last question was, where is your profit in this contract? No answer from him. As written, he was working for free. Case dismissed by judge without me having to present my side. Sorry, I didn't understand. Why not listing THR profit a problem? The contract is obviously bullshit. No sane contractor would charge exactly the amount they pay for subcontractors with not a single cent of profit on top. It means they are making their money by lying about how much they pay the subcontractors. The most obvious reason for doing that is to hide that they are taking a much bigger cut than is reasonable. In other words, they are ripping off their clients. My client was a woman working at a meat packing plant. Her glove, they would only give her the loose kind because they were cheaper, got caught in the machine and she lost her arm. We sued the owners of the plant for the glove issue. We also sued the machine manufacturer for failing to include the required guard. Then we sued the distributor for being in the chain of the sale but didn't really think they played much of a role. The manufacturer swore they included a handguard and said the plant owner must have used a grinder to take it off. During a deposition of the guy that owned the distraction company, he shows up with the sale documents he was supposed to have turned over weeks before. Turns out there was a note in small print at the bottom he didn't know about that said the sale was without the handguard, which is against the law. I pointed it out and we ended up settling that afternoon with the distributor. The woman got all her medical bills paid, got money for a prosthetic and got a bunch of pain and suffering damages. Damn, all the money in the world does not replace a lost arm. Never posted this before. Ex-wife, trying to fight ex-husband's new girlfriend, Ung is in her car trying to flee while X is beating on car, blocking escape, and grabbing at door handles to get in, but doors are locked. After X briefly moved out from the path of the car, Ung begins to drive away slowly. X, noticing the car starting to leave, dives onto the hood of the car. Slides off, gets run over at slow speed, and breaks bones. Several surgeries later, X sues Ung, alleging negligence in hitting X with the car. As I'm deposing X, she claims to have never touched the car before it hit her, never punched or kicked the car, never broke the windshield wipers, never grabbed the door handle to try to open the door, never dove on the hood, just yelling. I asked what Ung was doing during this time, and X describes Ung as deer in headlights, staring straight ahead, locked in her car, both hands on the steering wheel. How did you know the doors were locked? That one got dismissed pretty quickly. Edit, videotaped deposition 2, made sure that one was recorded. I acted for a plumber who ripped up a tile floor to replace a pipe. He installed new tile on top but warned the owners not to walk on it for 48 hours. He emphasized not to let their kids or their dogs walk on it either. They walked on it but alleged the defects were caused by improper install. We had an expert do a report which confirmed that it was consistent with proper installation but people walking on it too soon. Crazy homeowners still went to trial on it. In their evidence disclosure they included a series of pictures. One of the pictures had in the foreground a tile that was tilted upwards. The background very clearly showed a dog's paw pressing down on the other end of the tile. That wasn't so much an I got them situation as they got themselves. Old boss of mine went through something similar. Machined a part for this guy, coating vendor took forever and a day to apply the coating required, overnighted it back. Was on the verge of being late when it was delivered. Boss tells the guy to give the part 4 or 5 days for said coating to cure before install, because while it was solid enough to not put fingerprints in, it was still soft. This was an email with the coating vendor CC'd. This was on a Monday. Wednesday rolls around, dude calls up having a conniption about the coating failing and he's gonna get his money back in court yada yada. Boss says fuck you, sue me. They go to court. Guy's first mistake was suing for the cost of the entire part plus coating, which was like $2,500. This makes no sense because the part itself was fine and made completely to the print. Coating was junk. This dumb motherfucker presents pictures with dates of the part. Coating failed, mounted to the mating part the same day. My boss had emailed him and said wait a few days. Boss had print out of said email, which was sent 5 hours before UPS gave notification of the part being delivered. Judge tossed it, boss brought back ice cream, was a good day. I was involved in a patent dispute years ago that was basically large company going after small company. Not only did the judge decide we didn't infringe on the patents, but he then went on to invalidate the patents due to prior art we were able to show. Are the good old days before first to file came to pass. Prior art still applies to a race to the PTO application, and to any patent granted from it. Showing prior art remains in place as a defense to infringement. In a protective order hearing, a respondent admitted on cross that he choked his partner. His attorney looked like his head was going to explode. The judge still only granted an order not to abuse. He wouldn't grant the stay away or any other relief we asked for. Go figure. An order not to abuse. Isn't that just the law anyways? But this time they really mean it. My brother is an attorney. He had a case where the guy said he was permanently disabled from a work accident. At a deposition my brother overheard the guy talking about getting his house remodeled. He was already spending the money he thought he was getting. My brother drove by the house to see how much work was being done and saw the guy carrying bundles of roofing shingles up a ladder to the roof. This was before smartphones, so he drove to a Best Buy and bought a video camera, went back and recorded the guy. He had copies made and sent to the other attorney. The guy dropped the suit and was back at work the following Monday. My brother's client didn't want to pay for the video camera. He saved them thousands of dollars. They eventually paid, but he still gets a little peeved when he talks about it. Just out of curiosity, wouldn't the guy get charged for lying or whatever? There's no way he can go after a company for workers' comp or whatever and get caught in a lie then go straight back to work, right? Or would the company have to press charges? I and have told this story before, but it is a good one. I had a problem with my cell provider and my cell phone wasn't receiving a signal where my cottage is located, even though it was clearly marked as an area that would receive a full signal on their map. I went back to provider and told them of my problem, and they gave me a different phone with the same results. I then took back the phone and charger because they were useless to me at the time. This was over 20 years ago. They then sued me. In court I had a picture of the phone screen showing no bars while standing on my dock. Their lawyer argued that the picture could have been taken anywhere. Then the judge piped up, "I know where your cottage is, I have a cottage nearby." I switched providers because I could hardly get a signal where I am. There's no way you'll get a signal from X provider. Then the judge ripped into the representative from the cell company and their lawyer. It was a good day. Damn, that cell provider is anal. The judge ripped into the lawyer and the company rep for several minutes, telling them that I should sue them for having an impact on my credit report and harassment, and that he knew of several other people that had the same problem and that they were aware their map was incorrect. I just stood there trying not to laugh while at the same time thinking this can't be happening. The company rep looked like he was going to cry. My only regret was not walking out of the courtroom while looking at the both of them loudly proclaiming doing the Humpty Dance. Undefeated. Represented an employer in an FMLA retaliation claim. The plaintiff had quit, claiming a hostile work environment, then went on and started her own company that more or less competed with my client. In the plaintiff's deposition, the plaintiff went on and on about how sick she was when she went on FMLA leave, and how horribly she was treated by my client. Her new company had a Facebook page. I asked her about it, and had printed out several sections from the page, including photos. She admitted she had posted the photos, and more so posted them from her phone moments after they were taken. After I had those admissions on the record, I produced pictures of her touring the facility where her new business was located, smiling and walking with her friends. The date of those photos was while she was on FMLA leave from my client. What's FMLA? Family Medical Leave Act. It's a US law that essentially allows people to leave work for health reasons and still have a job when they return, absent some exceptions. Not as exciting / in the moment as some other ones here, but we hired a private investigator to track our defendant in a fraud / asset recovery case. Private investigator returned with a photograph of torn pieces of paper that clearly constituted a ripped-up note, albeit in a foreign language. I happened to know said foreign language, so pieced it together and realized it was a letter written by the defendant raging at his accomplice for making highly specific mistakes that fucked him over in the context of our fraud / asset recovery case. Obviously, we later had this verified and sworn to via affidavit by an official translator. It was unbelievable, the handwriting was a match, plus, he'd also signed it, and the contents were so specific, contained information about specific amounts going into specific trusts under specific names, that it was basically a smoking gun. We almost thought they'd planted it to throw us off, but the guy was just stupid and arrogant. Ran into a bit of a fight admissibility, but the letter ultimately helped us receive a significant settlement that made our clients extremely happy. He fucking signed it. He may as well just confessed. Our office went nuts over it because it seemed so unreal. It sounds a little ridiculous, particularly because lawyers rarely celebrate so prematurely, but my boss actually ordered a bottle of very expensive champagne for everyone to share that night. She was definitely a personality. I just This guy was supposed to be a sophisticated dealer and really, he had some very successful business dealings. He also clearly had some ego/rage issues that ultimately led to his downfall. Had a client accused of leading the cops on a high-speed chase. The cop on the stand estimated he was going 90 miles per hour, but never actually clocked him. Then the cop identified where the chase started with me, and where it ended. It lasted about 2 miles. Then we went through his log of when it started and when it ended. About 3.5 minutes. Once you walk through the math on that, the average speed of this chase was 35 miles per hour. Client got acquitted really quickly after that. When that math problem in 6th grade about how fast the car was going depending on its speed and distance traveled actually matters. Edit, thanks for silver. My client's wife was on the phone with her new boyfriend when he got home from a barbecue with their son. He asked her who she was on the phone with, and she freaked out and ran to the bedroom and locked herself inside. She told new BF that he'd hit her, that she was black and blue, etc. New BF is, understandably I guess, freaked out. He calls the cops and relays everything wifey said to him. Then he tells her he called the cops. She freaks out even more because now she's about to be caught in the lie. Cops show up, she tells them he hit her on the back of the head, that's why they can't see the mark. The cops feel the back of the head and she winces, lol. They arrest my dude. We take it to trial. When you testify at trial, certain prior convictions can be used against you to show the jury your character. Wifey had a prior conviction for falsifying statements to a grand jury in a different state a few years ago. In cross-exam, after she changed her story up and accused me of attacking her, I asked her about her prior conviction for lying to a jury. She lied about it to our jury. She said it didn't happen. I very calmly approached her with a certified record of her conviction and asked her to confirm it was her name, date of birth, then walked back to my stand and asked the same question. She refused to answer this time, just glared at me. The jury walked my client. Lying under oath and falsely accusing others should be punishable. Most of these people get away with it, which is disgusting. Edit, just to clear things up. I know that it's illegal. I was just saying that a lot of the false accusers never get punished or get very light sentences. In Canada it is a crime in the criminal code, it's called public mischief. If found guilty one can be fined up to $5,000 or sentenced 6 to 5 years in jail. I served on a jury that was deciding a medical malpractice case. The plaintiff's common bile duct was cut during a gallbladder surgery, a risk she was made aware of beforehand. She was suing the surgeon who performed the operation. The plaintiff's lawyer called as a witness a surgeon who had performed this surgery thousands of times. Speaking from this breadth of experience, he told us this mistake was entirely unacceptable and something that no competent surgeon would do. The defense lawyer got up and grilled him for a while to make it clear that this guy made bank by traveling around the country testifying against other surgeons. Right before he sat down, the defense lawyer said, "By the way, have you ever cut the common bile duct during this surgery?" The case was decided, and the jury all but burst out laughing when he answered, "Yes, I have." Obligatory, not a lawyer, but my grandparents had the longest running divorce settlement in LA history in the 70s. My grandpa refused to pay his alimony. One year, he went to Hawaii and sent my grandma a postcard that said something along the lines, but more wittingly, "I'm enjoying all of your alimony money, look at what I'm doing with it." She drove it straight to her lawyer, and it was game over for Gramps. Edit 1, the divorce was about 5 years long, it was the longest divorce in their city at the time. I'm sure it isn't anymore. Edit 2, my grandpa was ordered to pay her a few $1,000s a month, plus health insurance, car insurance, a car, and a few other things, until she got a job or remarried. Grandma chose to do neither. To this day, he is sending her a check. She can't medically drive anymore, but her car is rotting in the garage, just to spite him, so he has to pay the car insurance bills. How long was the divorce settlement? My client was being sued in China. We decided to sue them in US to convince the Chinese judge to dismiss the case so it can be heard in the US. We filed suit, and we got the other side to accept service. During the Chinese court hearing, the opposition wanted to have the Chinese court hear the case, but Chinese lawyers got shut down because they signed for the service in the US, implying that the US court is the proper jurisdiction and venue. Edit: the opposing Chinese lawyers were fired the next day. That one actually surprises me a bit, as someone who used to do some transnational stuff, albeit from a non-US perspective. I'm assuming there were other factors at play, but acceptance of service essentially constituting a jurisdiction agreement seems like a big leap. I've seen more cases go the opposite way. Was it just because opposing counsel accepted service that the Chinese court ruled in your favor, or was it a more multifactorial analysis?